That's one of the reasons why we picked this location, so thank you. Good afternoon, I'm Chris Davis. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Portland Police Bureau, and I'm filling in for Chief Lavelle, who is on vacation out of state right now. I want to start by saying, first of all, that all of the information that I'm going to share with you is just what we know right now. It's all very preliminary, and as I'm sure you know, there is a lot of investigative work to do, and these details that we all want and need in these situations will start to come together better as we go through that investigation. So we may find out that some things that we believe now change down the road. So this is just preliminary information at this point. But what I can tell you now is that about 9:30 a.m. this morning, East Precinct officers were dispatched to Lentz Park regarding a report of a gentleman described as a white male pointing a gun in the park. The officers arrived and they contacted a person in the park related to this call. At some point during this interaction, both less lethal and lethal force were deployed by the officers. Medical assistance was staged nearby, as is protocol in these situations, and the officers provided emergency medical attention at the scene, but the gentleman was pronounced deceased there at the scene. At this point, there are no known injuries to community members. There are no injuries to any of the officers involved. And we obviously have a very complex and multi-layered investigation that happens in these situations. And so members of our detective division, the East County Major Crimes Team, our Internal Affairs Unit, and Independent Police Review, and our Training Division are all at the scene doing their preliminary investigative work. These efforts are being hampered somewhat by a crowd of fairly aggressive people who have showed up at the scene, but at this point we've been able to keep them from interfering too much in the investigation. Again, this is never the outcome that we want when our police officers go to any kind of a call. And certainly these are very traumatic events for everyone involved, the people involved in the incident, and for neighborhoods and for communities, and we certainly understand that, and we want to recognize that, but it is important that we do the appropriate investigative work on all these different levels, get to the bottom of what happened, and discover whether there are any lessons learned or anything like that. But all of that process takes a long time, and I'm sure as we go through the investigation, more details will surface. So that's what I can tell you. I'm happy to take a few questions in the time that I have. I don't know that at this point. I don't know the answer to that. I do not know that either at this point. We're still really early in this, and so there's a whole process to figure that out that hasn't happened yet. Yes, ma'am. There was a less lethal launcher used and a firearm. No, it's a 40 millimeter. It's called a less lethal projectile launcher. And it fired what? It would have been the standard. It's the only thing that we use with those, the standard less lethal round that those fire. Does that answer your question? I don't know the answer to that at this point. I'm sorry. Did the less lethal weapon make contact? And I don't know the answer to that either at this point. Well, the only thing that we can do when a situation like this happens, or when there's any either controversial or I would say any kind of incident like this that gets a lot of, and very understandably, attention, there will always be people who don't trust what we do, and what we have to do is do the best, most objective investigation that we can anyway. Again, on those multiple levels, both with our detectives in coordination with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, and then our own internal review that's focused more on policy issues and whether training was followed, and then also seeks to answer questions about whether there are lessons that we can learn from a situation like this. And all we can do is just ensure that we do that work in the most objective way and the most thorough way possible. And then that all gets reviewed, obviously, outside by independent police review, the OIR group, and there's a very robust system of review of these cases in place to ensure that we get it right.
Was it one officer or more than one fired?
I can't answer that at this time.
Was that lethal? Was that two different officers?
That I can say yes.
Was this person homeless or known to the park, or what was the situation with this being?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
It's masks. I can't tell who was.
Yeah, was this person homeless, or what was the situation with this person being in the park? Sorry, we've already said this.
It's too early to know at this point, all of that background. Those are obviously details that we'll try to find out in the investigation.
This is an area where Portland Street Response is typically patrolling. Were they called out to this area? We heard it was a person in a mental health crisis. I don't know if you can address that, or did the Street Response team respond?
Street Response was not dispatched, and given the information that we had, it would not have been appropriate. This call would have been outside Street Response protocols.
Do you know if there were any rangers in the park at the time?
I don't know whether there were or not.
We'd also heard people say there were maybe multiple calls this morning for this individual. Do you know if there was more than that 9:30 call that you got from other neighbors or anyone in the area?
I don't know how many calls we received from the community about this. No, and again, those are all details that we'll have to go back through dispatch and call-taking records and find out.
Can you talk about the response of officers to the scene once people started congregating, community members?
Sure. As I said, we had a decent-sized crowd of fairly aggressive people that showed up at the scene. At some points, some members of this group, for some reason, broke crime scene tape down. And so, unfortunately, to respond to that, we've had to summon just about every police officer in Multnomah County to come keep this group far enough away so that all of the different investigators that I talked about can do their work at the scene, and to preserve what we refer to in our business as the integrity of the scene, so nobody who shouldn't be in there goes in there. I mean, just to put it in a little context, I myself can't even go in that scene because I have no investigative purpose for being there. And if I go in there, I need to be able to explain why, because of the possibility that I might somehow, if I'm not careful, introduce things into the scene that weren't there, or accidentally take some piece of evidence, some forensic evidence or something like that out with me. So we have to, in these situations, be very careful and only allow as few people into that scene as possible, and people who actually have some investigative need to be there.
Was a gun recovered from the man who was shot and killed?
I can't answer that yet.
You say all, you talk Sheriff Gresham, did you call mutual aid?
I do know that we got help from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and I am not sure about Gresham, but I know that all of our officers, or just about all of them in the city, are tied up here, and I know the Sheriff's Office sent a number of officers as well. We can release that when it's appropriate to do so, and it's a balancing act. And one thing that I always ask people to keep in mind in these situations is the district attorney is actually in charge of the investigation, and so we really need to respect their needs as far as the role that they play. But certainly we will make every effort as soon as we can and as soon as it's appropriate, without potentially compromising some part of the investigation, to release more details like that and others when we can. But it's always a balance between the public's right to know what has happened and the need to maintain the integrity of that investigation so that the public can have faith in it, that we did it right and that we haven't rushed anything and that we haven't messed up the evidence somehow.
Other than the officers that responded, are there other witnesses that were in the park that are being interviewed? Or?
I don't know the answer to that, whether there are non-police witnesses to this yet or not, but certainly we are very interested if there's anyone who did witness this. If they would contact us, we would appreciate that.
How big was the crowd that gathered there after the shooting?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would go from my own observations. It was in the number of dozens.
Okay. Did police have to do anything to remove them?
At one point, we did have to get a crowd that was encroaching fairly closely to the scene to move back a little bit so that they could, people are always welcome to go in any public place that's outside the sort of controlled area in one of these crime scenes, and certainly people engaged in First Amendment activity are welcome to do that. But we just, again, we have to balance those needs with our need to do a fair and complete and credible investigation and maintain the integrity of that scene.
One more question, please.
This question was asked on scene. I'm wondering if you might be able to add a little more clarity to this. PPB detectives investigation, or detectives division investigating a Portland police officer involved shooting. Can you talk about that and why that's the policy? You know, there are other agencies in our area that typically will have an outside agency that investigate officer involved shooting. Can you give a little insight on why that's the case?
Sure, that's an ongoing policy discussion, really, that I think is a good policy discussion to have. But you know, the way our system is set up right now, our detectives participate in the East County Major Crimes Team, which also has detectives there from outside agencies. And then the whole thing is overseen really by the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office. And so, you know, if the District Attorney's Office thinks that maybe there's a problem with the investigation or there's something that we're missing or more questions that need to be asked, they have the ability to make sure those things get resolved. Not yet. I haven't had time for that yet.
Is he on vacation all this week or next week?
Yes.
With so many resources tied up in this,
Why the stick team wasn't dispatched?
Are you talking about Portland Street Response?
Yes, Portland Street Response, yes.
Yeah, based on what I know of the call for service that we received, this would not have fit within the protocols to dispatch them. This would not have been one of their calls.
Which, like, can you expect, like, what protocols wouldn't they be?
They don't respond to calls where it's reported that someone has a weapon.
what does this mean for other calls for service today since you have so many resources at this?
I think the public can expect significant delays in receiving police service until we're able to get the scene processed and resolve the issues on the perimeter of the scene there. But certainly, as I always like to say, if you need our help, call us, and it's our job to figure out a way to get you the help that you need, so don't hesitate to call us if you need us. And I apologize, but